Welcome to The Real News. I'm Mark Steiner. Great to have you all with us. When you hear the word Guantanamo, what pops into your head? 9/11 and the al-Qaeda prisoners who've been held there for a long time. What also pops into some of our minds is the word torture and legal battles that have been raging all these years with detainees suing the United States government, the CIA, and psychologists like James Mitchell and Bruce Jessen, who implemented, designed, and carried out what's called enhanced interrogation techniques, like waterboarding, slamming heads into walls, putting people in 21 by 30-inch boxes, and keep them naked in freezing temperatures. Some, as the detainees' lawyers argue, would call it torture. Now, after 8 years of pretrial hearings, trials may begin of people like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and others who were involved in 9/11. Along with the allegations of torture are unknowns like, who was the preacher who oversaw this torture? What are the FBI, the CIA, and the U.S. government keeping classified so, as some would argue, to keep the truth and the names of the authorizers and those who carried out their orders hidden from the light of day? Are there still black sites around the world? Does torture still continue? What are these hearings and trials really telling us? What's about to happen here? We talked today with one of the people who's been covering this for a long time and just got back from Guantanamo himself, Julian Borger, World Affairs Editor for The Guardian, who's been a correspondent throughout the world, the United States, Middle East, Eastern Europe, the Balkans. His book on the pursuit and capture of the Balkan war criminals, The Butcher's Trail, is published by Other Press. And Julian Borger, welcome. Good to have you with us.
Good to be here.
Can we take a step back just for a moment? And let's take, when I talked about that 8 years of history and what has been going on, just a brief outline for a second for our viewers about what we're about to talk about, what has led up to it.
Well, these are detainees, 5 detainees who've been in Guantanamo now for 14 years. And we're still in pre-trial hearings. This is 8 years of pre-trial hearings. There's supposed to be a trial starting next year, but not everyone in Guantanamo is confident that the trial would actually start next year. So we are stuck in a kind of legal morass caused really by the nature of the detention and later treatment of these detainees who are on trial.
I mean, this appears to be kind of a stunning amount of time for pretrial hearings. So, I mean, why is it taking this long? This is an inordinate amount of time to try men who have been charged with these heinous crimes, and also their defense attorneys who are also arguing about torture. Why is it taking so long?
This is because these people were picked up in Afghanistan, Pakistan, around the world, and interrogated by the CIA, who were under the belief that they could give information that could stop a second wave of attacks after the 9/11 attacks. And so, as we've been hearing from the witnesses this week, they didn't really care about due process. They were just wanted to get information out of them they believed could stop a second attack. So when they then changed their mind and decided they are going to prosecute these people and pursue the death penalty, then the way they treated them, the torture that they underwent, becomes a very important part in terms of whether these people will go to trial. And obviously the defense is saying that neither the statements they gave under torture or after torture should be admissible in court because of the history of torture and the fact that these were statements given under duress. So some of the defense are asking for the whole case to be dismissed. Others are saying that these statements that they gave in 2007, which are really is the core of the prosecution case, should not be admissible. And this is a legal limbo this case has been stuck at now for 8 years.
So let's talk about some of the people involved here. You mentioned in your article, and the James Mitchell, who has been testifying this week, and I think you said to me before we went on the air together that Bruce Jessen is about to testify. Why are they testifying? Who are they? Tell us about them.
Okay, these were 2 psychologists who had worked for the U.S. Air Force and had become taken on as a CIA as private contractors. And initially they went out to these CIA black sites to observe what was going on and make recommendations as the CIA wanted to step up the pressure on these detainees to cough up information. But they ended up making these recommendations about how to set up interrogation based on U.S. survival techniques, as they train U.S. pilots and other U.S. members of armed forces to evade and resist interrogation when they're captured. And they wanted to bring these techniques that are used on U.S. service members and make it the guidelines, the outline for what they called the enhanced interrogation techniques. And so they ended up designing this program, and then they were asked by the CIA to apply this program. So they, in effect, they became hired torturers, although they were contractors, and eventually set up a company, Mitchell, Jessen and Associates, that sold these services to the U.S. government.
And made a lot of money. If I think it was your article, I believe it was in your article, it could have been someone else. I read so much this morning, that he made almost $81 million over a 4 or 5 year period. Or did I read that wrong?
No, that's what they were paid, but that was to provide a whole lot of security guards. They ended up providing all the security guards for the black sites and renditions. So it was all contracted out. So that wasn't pure profit. That was what the
Gotcha.
total of the government paid him. I think Mitchell was paid something around $1.5 million, and Jessen slightly less.
A little more than you and I make in a year, but but there are there's other people involved here. We don't know about, called the preacher, and the new sheriff. I guess a man named Charlie Wise, who passed away some years back. But they're key to a lot of this in terms of not knowing who they are. This is kind of the tip of the iceberg of the secrets that we may never know.
That's right. I think Mitchell has been pushing back over the past week that he was the face and the totality of the enhanced interrogation system. And he has been pointing out, and there is a lot of evidence that there was a big bureaucracy and infrastructure around the use of torture. This was a sort of whole of government effort that the FBI was, it looks like, more involved than they have made out in the past. And it went throughout the CIA and, of course, up to the top ranks of the Bush administration. So this was a large and organized use of torture that involved other characters like the preacher, like Charlie Wise, who we've only found out his identity after he's died. But the CIA will not declassify them. They won't make any of the CIA officials or former officials that the defense have asked to question available, except these two contractors, Mitchell and Jessen. And so because, in a way, the CIA has been prepared to throw these two to the wolves, we know about them, but there's a whole lot more that we don't know about. I
mean, you wrote in the piece, your most recent piece in The Guardian, that almost everyone else involved in the extensive program involving a network of black sites around the world has remained in the shadows. In terms of legality, it's still the dark side of the moon. So, I mean, for all we know, these black sites can keep going on. The tortures that people say are torture that took place in Guantanamo could still be going on. We don't know how far up the chain this could go. Does it go to Dick Cheney? Does it go to George Bush? Or to Obama, or whoever else was in charge at the moment. So, I mean, this is, there's a lot we don't know and a lot we may never know. So, what do you think could come out in this trial hearing, if anything, that could lead us to any conclusions?
Well, I think we're a long way from conclusions. I think that the CIA would really have to change their attitude towards declassification, or be forced to by the military commissions or by habeas cases in the outside courts, forced to declassify more than they've let on, because even the Senate report on torture is a summary and a small fragment of the kind of documentation that is out there. So that it is possible, if this ever went to trial, that we would learn a whole lot more about the use of torture by the US in this period. It is possible, for example, in the pre-trial hearings, that Abu Zubaydah, who was the first to undergo these enhanced interrogation techniques, might be allowed to stand as a witness. Now, up to now, the government has resisting that, but that has been challenged in court.
Because I think you wrote about this being the 40th hearing in 8 years, and that they're changing the rules as they go, that there were that the things that were declassified and put in books were now classified again as secrets, so they can't use them in court. So clearly the government is using everything they can to not let a lot of information out during the course of this trial, which could affect everything, as well as our understanding of the truth.
Yeah, they have been using classification rules tactically, declassifying things when they want to enter them into evidence, and then reclassifying them when it is possible that the defense might be able to use it to their advantage. And this was a good example. Just days before this hearings began, the prosecution introduced a third version of the classification rules that made material that had been published and been subject to CIA pre-publication review, made that classified once more, so that there was a question about whether defense counsels in court over the past week could refer to books that have been out in print for years.
One of the things here I think is important to talk just for a moment about, this whole question of torture and how we define what torture is. The UN and various human rights groups have declared things like waterboarding. Literally pouring water into somebody's face and throat for up to 40 seconds at a time as torture. People feel they're drowning and more. Some people have died. And some other techniques, like the rectal hydration and force feeding through the rectal cavity. Those things also have been said by doctors to be not medically suitable. Nobody uses these techniques, and classified as torture. So, what about this argument about torture? What do we take from this?
Well, I think even by the very narrow definition produced by the Bush administration about not causing lasting psychological or physical harm, even by that very narrow definition, clearly what went on in these years in the black sites was torture. But by the Geneva Convention on Torture and Cruel, Degrading and Inhuman Treatment, there's no question that many of these techniques amounted to torture. And of course, Barack Obama admitted that they amounted to the torture when he said, yes, well, we tortured some folks.
Exactly. And no matter which administration was, this goes on. And people like James Mitchell and Bruce Jesson, who we talked about a moment ago, who implemented all this and designed some of this, were sued by detainees in the past. And some secret settlement was made. And now they're testifying, trying to blame it on others, even getting, I think as you wrote, getting tearful in the courtroom.
That's right. Mitchell's kind of choked up on several occasions when looking back at the kind of choices he had to make and the sacrifices that, in his view, he made to protect the country, which was really something that really struck me, that when describing waterboarding and the other techniques, he was entirely detached and would sometimes laugh and wink. It was very strange. But then when talking about his own dilemmas and sacrifices, he would choke up very easily and said he's the sort of guy who cries while watching dog food commercials. So there was something very strange about that kind of that distinction between him talking about himself and talking about what he did to other people.
Well, when you wrote that, which we're just speaking about, it reminds me sometimes of the things, the Nuremberg trials and other places where just very normal, everyday human beings carry this stuff out. And there are many, many other people involved besides Mitchell and Jesson, and they live their lives daily. They take care of their children. They do whatever they do for their lives in the midst of torturing other human beings because of whatever circumstance it was. I mean, that to me is what's glaring in all of this. And let me just stop there for a moment.
No, absolutely. And the kind of banality of it all. They saw themselves as doing a job. They were psychologists, and they framed it all in very kind of technical language. But this again reinforces this impression that we got from the past week of hearings of how this came on from on high. Because at one point in August 2002, Mitchell believed that he'd brought Abu Zubaydah around. He'd put him under enough of these enhanced interrogation techniques to make him compliant. And he said, okay, we should stop now. We've done enough. And there were these cables coming back from CIA headquarters saying, no, we think you should carry on, stay to the course. And some coming from messages coming from his superiors in Washington, calling them pussies and calling their manhood into question, and also putting the onus on them, saying, well, if there is another catastrophic attack on the U.S. in which Americans die, well, it'll be on you. And so this is how they drove, rationalized, and justified the whole process. This conviction that these people, the people that they were torturing, held this information that could save thousands of American lives.
I know while foreign correspondents, military correspondents can have deep analysis, can also get very jaundiced after years of watching this kind of stuff and reporting on it and seeing what happens in the human condition. But I wonder where you think this trial and this moment may lead us. Any possibilities of kind of changing the way we behave, changing the way governments behave? I mean, I'm just curious where you think this might all take us over the next couple of years.
I'm not all that optimistic that it is going to change minds. I mean, we've been exposed to the realities of this now for several years. And you only have to look at the Spy Museum, where they put up an exhibit on torture, describing what was done, and waterboarding, and these small boxes in which people were confined. And there were, as part of the exhibit, there were these buttons you could press. And it asked you if you thought that you could prevent another attack, would you carry out this torture? And the majority of the visitors to the museum pressed yes, the button saying, yes, I would carry out these techniques.
Well, we'll leave it there for the moment, and I hope to talk to you very soon as this unfolds even more and see what you find when you go back to Guantanamo, you and the others at The Guardian. First, William, before I say thank you, let me say thank you for all the work you've done, the reporting you've done over these years, and thank you for taking your time with us at The Real News today.
Thank you, a pleasure.
And I'm Mark Steiner here of The Real News Network. We'll be doing more of this. We have to stay on top of it. Take care.
Thanks a lot for watching. Appreciate it. But do us one more solemn favor. Hit the subscribe button below. You know you want to. Stay up on the videos.